So it looks like my dream of a foldable iPad is going to become a reality a little bit sooner than we anticipated. Let's talk about it. So as someone who's been an iPad first user for about 7 or 8 years now at this point, and when the first foldables truly started to come out with the Z Fold and the Z Flip, and now Google getting into the game, and then Huawei as well, it was really one of those things where I thought it was a match made in heaven. Why not have your iPhone unfold itself into a larger kind of phablet or tablet territory? Or why not have something like an iPad mini form factor size that when it's folded, and then when it's unfolded, it turns into a much bigger iPad Pro type of canvas that's running some sort of kind of mesh software like iPadOS and macOS combined that'll really help and be beneficial across the board. Right, and that's been kind of the talks for years now at this point, but it's now almost 2025, but Apple still has not released a single foldable piece of tech, and I think it's because Apple likes to not always be first or something, but they like to perfect it, and there's still a lot of material science that's getting in the way, especially when it comes to folding something like an OLED display, and then getting rid of that crease, which is something that a lot of people are still very hesitant about, as well as also the durability of something like a foldable device. So you might have seen one of my more recent videos about the iPhone 17 Air and the speculation around that, and how everything is now going back into the thinness form factor. Apple really went deep into being as thin as possible, all the way up to, I believe, the iPhone 6, 7, and 8 lineup, and then they went back over to battery life and efficiency and not worrying about the thinness because it just wasn't as practical. Things were a little bit more fragile when they were thin, but Apple seems to be kind of steering right back into there, especially when you start to look at their current product categories, right? Right now, the M4 iPad Pro is the thinnest piece of tech that Apple's ever made at 5.1 millimeters in thickness. Also, the MacBook Airs are extremely thin, which is great to see, but they're also symmetrical along the entire way. And then Apple's slowly getting back into that game. They made the Apple Watch Series 10 a little bit thinner, and now, like I mentioned, that iPhone 17 Air is supposed to be, again, the thinnest thing that Apple's ever created when it does release next year in 2025. And I think part of the reason why Apple's doing that is because A, they want to flex their forte from a hardware perspective and how they can be extremely efficient and very cool and manage all the CPU because of their Apple Silicon with their M4 and then eventually their M5, M6, and M7 chips, but they also are gearing themselves to making a foldable form factor because they know that when it's unfolded, it needs to be ultra thin because when it's folded, it's going to be a much thicker device overall. So let's talk about what we know so far when it comes to this new foldable iPad. Now this is going to be an ultra premium device. This is going to be maybe not quite in that Vision Pro territory from a price point, but don't expect this to be only $1,000. This is going to be in that $2,500 range because ideally this is going to be your all-in-one. This is going to be your tablet, this is going to be your computer, this is also going to be your desktop at the end of the day because when it's unfolded, supposedly we're going to get about an 18.8 to a 20.1 inch display when fully unfolded, and we're talking about the size diagonally. So that's going to be big enough to be larger than a laptop, but also big enough where you can make it a desktop solution if needed. It's going to be a little bit smaller than the iMac, but we've seen 21-inch desktop solutions in the past, although now they are in the 24 to 27 inch range. But being able to unfold it vertically to then have some sort of a laptop form factor with a touchscreen keyboard, but then unfolding it fully to be a desktop solution with a Bluetooth wireless mouse and keyboard, and then when it's folded shut, it could be your tablet solution as well. So that's a 3-in-1 solution, and that's why it will be priced at that $2,500 price point. So again, Apple's been working towards this for years now, especially with the inclusion of the Tandem OLED, so being able to now have a ProMotion foldable display is going to be key when it comes to creating a piece of hardware like this. So we should be getting the same kind of design spec and display tech that we've been getting over the past few years. Like I mentioned, that Tandem OLED on both the front display as well as the inner display. But one of the things that should separate the Apple from the competition from foldable display tech is that Apple's going to be able to get rid of that crease in the middle that a lot of other companies have not been able to do. One of the ones that got very close to that creaseless kind of form factor was the Moto Razr because they had that teardrop design when it was shut as opposed to closing it completely shut versus something like the Z Flip or the Z Fold where it does fully crease that display and that crease is very visible when you do open it up. Although I have said from first party accounts and people letting us know how it is that after a while, similar to the notch on the MacBook, you do get used to it and it kind of just disappears as long as you have something like a dark wallpaper or you're watching maybe some content on the display itself. And then when it comes to operating systems and software, I've been mentioning this for years, but you might have noticed that over the last 2 or 3 years, especially since Apple integrated their new M series chipset, it looks like iOS, iPadOS, and macOS are slowly combining into one kind of hybrid system or operating system because you've noticed that now we can run iPad and iOS apps on your macOS computer and run them fully because they are using the same exact chipsets and vice versa. And also you have the App Store library, which has millions and millions and millions of applications on the iOS and iPadOS front, versus the Mac App Store, we're only in the thousands, and that Mac App Store is much more mature compared to the App Store that we have for iOS and iPadOS, which goes to show you that a lot of the developers are coding for that language as opposed to macOS because there's just a lot more devices that'll run that. So that gives us an idea of what's going on from a creation and a resources perspective on the development side that most people want to develop for iPadOS and iOS versus macOS. But that is where this hybrid system comes into play because of the fact that they are using the same chipsets. By this point, when the foldable iPad does come out, we'll probably be on the M6 and the M6 Pro and M6 Ultra and things like that. But really the idea is the same here, where because we are being taught to kind of use these operating systems in conjunction and with each other and supplementally, that we'll be used to having this hybrid OS when the time comes to have this kind of larger iPadOS, macOS type of hybrid operating system when this foldable iPad does come into play. So that is what we know about the foldable iPad thus far. We know roughly the size and the dimensions and the screen size that we're going to deal with. We know some of the technology that Apple's kind of leaning towards from an OLED perspective. I know Apple's goal is for it to be creaseless when it does come out into play, and Apple's known for not being first, but being usually the best when it comes to hardware and software implementations. Of course, this is going to be AI and Apple Intelligence powered, and I'm sure by then it'll be a little bit more mature in terms of how we use it and how it's going to be used in our everyday lives. But now having kind of this home hub of a giant display that can be a desktop monitor, that can be a laptop, that can be a tablet, that can also supplement you with your iPhone or your Vision Pro Lite or whatever the case is at that point, it's going to have a nice little solution set when it comes to a piece of hardware in Apple's ecosystem, and of course it's going to play well across all the different Apple devices. Now the rumor is this is like a 2026 to 2028 kind of situation, so don't kind of hold your breath or hold off on buying an iPad until then. We still have plenty of time until that happens, but at least we know that it's in the works alongside some sort of foldable iPhone in kind of that flip form factor where it flips down vertically as opposed to opening up horizontally. But that is what we know so far about this foldable iPad. I, for one, am excited, more so maybe not about the form factor, but more so about the future of the operating systems and how they work together overall, because like I mentioned, we're kind of coming and conjoining into this one peak where I think at one point everything will be exactly the same and apps will be working across each other. It'll just be kind of, instead of talking about the different OSs, we're just going to be talking about form factors in terms of iPhone versus iPad versus Mac, and not really the differentiation in different OSs and limitations that these have, because they're all, at the end of the day, going to be the same thing. But that'll do for this video. Leave a comment down below. Are you down for this foldable future? Do you guys want a foldable iPhone? Do you want a foldable iPad? Do you think Apple will create this two-in-one that'll maybe cannibalize a lot of other systems and other pieces of hardware? I am very curious to know what they end up doing and how this is going to come into fruition, because at the end of the day, it is going to be coming. It's just a matter of when and how they actually market it to us. But that'll do it, everybody. If you made it to the end, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know you made it to the end. And if you want to watch more videos like this one, definitely check out one of these videos right here. And until next time, I'm Fernando, and I'm out of here, everybody. Peace.